Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Meredyth Willits, and today I'm sitting down with someone whose faith has literally taken him all the way to the White House. Pastor Jackson Lahmeyer is a key member of the White House Faith Council, and he was personally present in the Oval Office when President Trump signed the executive order that established it. Since then, Jackson has been helping lead the council's work to uncovering systemic anti-Christian bias within federal institutions like the DOJ, FBI, and IRS. He's also the founder of Pastors for Trump, a nationwide coalition of faith leaders uniting thousands of pastors across all 50 states to boldly stand for faith, family, and freedom. In his new book, Chasing After the Wind, Jackson opens up about the dangers of platform culture, the erosion of spiritual integrity and leadership, and the urgent call to live with purpose in a post-Christian America. This is a bold, grounded, and deeply personal conversation about conviction, courage, and calling one that challenges us to look at what we believe and why it matters more than ever. So stay with us. Hello, everyone. This is Meredyth with a Y, and I am your host, Meredyth Willits. Today, we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. Hello, and thank you so much for being on today.
Well, it is so good to see you and love all that you're doing, and it's an honor to be with you. I think we'll have a good time today.
I think it'll be good. So your book really, and your premise, your focus here is to ensure that Christians are not being systemically targeted, if you will. Can you talk about specific maybe lawsuits or formal complaints that have been filed? And if so, like what has been the outcome of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in 2024 for the presidential campaign, I was tasked to lead Pastors for Trump, which was the coalition of pastors to mobilize the largest voting bloc in America, which is the evangelical voting bloc. And so, we had over 10,000 pastors, all 50 states, and President Trump made promises to these pastors. And he said, if you all get me back in the White House, I will do something no president has ever done. I will launch a faith office in the White House. Other administrations have had faith initiatives. Bush had one, Trump had one during his first term, but this is a standalone office in the White House. And he said, the reason we're going to have this office is because and I know there has been a targeting of people of faith, primarily Christians, in the United States of America by the federal government. That's the DOJ, FBI, ATF, but primarily the IRS. And so President Trump, as you know, won the election. And the thing I love about him as a politician is he's so unlike other politicians who on the campaign trail promise pastors, when I get in, I'll start an office just for you guys. Then he gets in and I can't do it. Sorry, guys, can't do it. President Trump's not like that. He kept his word. He started the faith office. And the objective has been to unravel and uncover this targeting. And on the White House's official website, there are hundreds of cases that are there in regards to how the federal government under Barack Obama accelerated under Joe Biden went after people of faith. And I'll just give you the big granddaddy one of them all. It is Grand Canyon University. Grand Canyon University is a conservative Christian university. And during Biden's administration, received the largest fine by the IRS, get this, in U.S. history. So a conservative Christian college receives the largest fine in U.S. history for political involvement and political engagement. Now think about this for just a moment. Don't you think Harvard has been politically engaged? Don't you think Yale has been politically engaged? Not on the conservative end of things, but on the liberal side of things. And so Grand Canyon University received the largest fine ever. President Trump undid that fine. Liberty University.
What were they
also
fined for?
Political involvement and engagement as a university, being private university. And
What does that look like? Like, how do they, what did they do?
They fined them. Biden's DOJ through the IRS fined Grand Canyon University Grand Canyon University never paid anything on the fine because they took it to court, right? Then when President Trump got in office, he he eradicated that fine. So they don't have to pay a penny of it, simply because they were involved in political engagement and involved, just being involved politically, which, we're told separation. Christians shouldn't be involved in government, separation of church and state, and all those type of things. And the problem is Harvard University does the exact same thing, just on the other end of things. Harvard University doesn't receive a fine; they get a grant. They get a grant. Christian universities. So there's this dichotomy of a bias. Then, when you bring it down to the individual level, you have Grand Canyon University, you have Liberty University, same scenarios. But on an individual level, the cases are just astonishing of
So what you're
pastors.
talking about is not necessarily people that work inside of government having complaints because they've been targeted. You're talking about agencies targeting
Yes. Yes.
Christian base.
Federal agencies targeting Christian organizations and individual Christians. And this was done primarily through the IRS. So if you were a conservative pastor, your likelihood of being audited by the IRS multiplied exponentially.
Mm.
You compare conservative pastors to other demographics of people. Well, if you're a conservative pastor under Obama, you remember the whole Tea Party thing, how the IRS was used to go after the Tea Party. So it was the same thing being done to Christians and people of faith. Now, there also was within the agencies, if you were a Christian, you did not have the same opportunities as there was a discrimination going against Christians. And so all of this, like I said, is on the White House's website, and the cases are just numerous, just numerous. And so President Trump literally started the anti-Christian bias task force to investigate all of this, to bring it to the table. And obviously the investigation is still taking place. You're dealing with so many. We've only had a short amount of time. And then bringing to the table, what's the answer? How do we make sure this never happens again? Because religious liberty is foundational to the American experiment. Just as nobody should get in between a patient and their doctor, nobody should get in between a person and God, especially the U.S. government. As an American citizen, you have the right to practice your faith however you choose without being concerned that the government's going to come after you because you're a conservative Christian. It's been a one-way bias. They're not going and targeting Muslims. They're not going and targeting liberal Christians. It's been a targeting of conservative Christians. And I'm just grateful we've got a president that realizes it, acknowledges it, and is ready to do something about it.
Does your task force look at other forms of going after, like maybe like you said, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, whatever the other religion? Do you guys work on that, or is it only because it is a task force in the government? Do you guys look at other religious
Of course, of course.
infringements?
Yes, obviously, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Buddhist, you can be an atheist, you can be a Jewish individual. Your decision to practice your faith is protected constitutionally. The problem is the targeting was not against Muslims. The targeting was not against Buddhists. The targeting was not against Hindus. The targeting was specifically against Christians. So that's why the committee is the anti-Christian bias task force, because there's not an anti-Muslim bias within the U.S. federal government. There's not an anti-Hindu bias within the federal government. Obviously, if there ever was, you would stop it immediately. But there is not. There has not been, and there is not. It's been a one-way targeting against conservative Christians, and so that's why the task force was launched. But the faith office covers all people of faith, not just Christians, not just evangelicals, all people of faith. But unfortunately, under Obama, accelerated under Biden, it was a one-way targeting. Conservative Christians were considered domestic threats. They called us Christian nationalists, labeled domestic threats by the FBI. It's been a one-way targeting.
What do you define as a, did you say Christian nationalist?
Well, that's what we're labeled.
Oh,
The media. So I am labeled, I'll be more specific, a white Christian nationalist. New York
yeah.
Times labeled me one of the leading voices among white Christian nationalists. They didn't mean that as a compliment. what they define as a white Christian nationalist is essentially a Nazi, that I'm a white supremacist, that I want a theocracy, not a democracy, and that therefore, according to the FBI under Biden, I am a domestic threat to this country. And old ladies out praying outside abortion clinics were being rounded up and arrested, and because they were domestic threats. And so when they describe me as a Christian nationalist, they mean that I'm a threat to our nation. Now, to be honest, those two words don't offend me at all. First of all, I am a Christian, first and foremost. Before I'm a citizen of the United States of America, I claim my citizenship of the kingdom of God. I'm a Christian first. However, I also happen to be a nationalist. I want to put America first. So those two words don't offend me. I embrace Christian nationalist, but that's not what they mean when they describe someone like me as a Christian. They mean that as a term. Watch out for this guy. He's a potential ticking time bomb that is going to lead some great violent overthrow of our democracy. And that's just not true at all.
When you talk about nationalism, and we talk about make America great again, America first, things of that nation, nature, all those things that Trump ran on. Do you see some of the things that he's doing currently, giving money to different countries, as going kind of against his original things that he was running on?
Well, I think it's complex in the sense of when we say America first, at least for me, I can't speak on behalf of everybody that, puts the America first agenda as their political philosophy. But I recognize that we do not live in, say, an isolationist world where we can just put our heads in the sand and not worry about anything that is happening around the globe, because we're an interconnected world. It's just the world that we live in, social media, digital things that are happening, trade. So what happens in the Middle East does have an impact on America First agendas. However, does that mean that I want to be funding never ending wars? Does that mean that I want to be taking care of other countries' citizens before we take care of our own citizenry? Not at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. However, do we have to have engagement and involvement on the world scene? Absolutely. Because if we don't lead as the leading nation and as the leader of the free world, being the president, somebody else will. And I don't like all the other characters that are out there on the world scene. So obviously, I want America to lead the world. I want America to be the leader at the forefront. Does that mean we dominate? And does that mean that we're involved in everybody's business? Of course not. You cannot police the world, but you do have a presence and you do have an involvement. So that's my America First understanding, is we do have interest in what is happening across the globe. It will affect us economically. It affects us in a sense of domestic protection. So I am interested in what's happening. However, before we take care of another country's issues, I think we have to first look at our own problems.
So, like, when I define Christianity for my own personal self, I look at it as a follower of Christ's teachings. And when I look at what Trump is doing right now, and like what, therefore, then this attachment to the Christian word, okay, what we're calling Christian, to me, it seems very combative. Like, I have a hard time looking at what's going on by this administration and going, yeah, that's definitely what a follower of Christ would do, be it with ICE or be it with the war, and what's going on with Palestine, trying to start wars in other countries, South America, fighting tariffs, things of that nature, just that combative, anti-human kind of mentality. How do you say I'm a Christian and I'm aligned with this leader and this administration when the majority of the actions that he's taking is not necessarily what a follower of Christ would believe?
I think it's a great question. And I think the first thing you have to do is you have to separate the role of an individual Christian and the role of a government. So the Bible defines the role of an individual Christian to live the lifestyle that Jesus would live, to think like Jesus, to speak like Jesus, to behave like Jesus. That is what I am to do as an individual. However, Jesus says, for me, I am to turn the other cheek. Somebody strikes me on one side, I turn the cheek to the other side. That is not the role of government. The role of government is not to turn the other cheek. The Bible describes the role of government. God invented government, and God defines the purpose of government. The purpose of civil government is to protect good citizens and to punish evil doers. Paul says if you're an evil doer, you should be very afraid. In fact, you should be terrified of the government, because the government is to protect good citizens and to punish evildoers. That is not my job. Vengeance and justice is not in my hands as an individual, but it is in the hands of God and government. God uses government to bring about justice to evildoers. And so, in regards to ICE has a purpose. It is to go after wrong and evildoers. These are people that are here illegally. These are many cases people that are committing very violent crimes. It is not my job as an individual to go round up illegals and put them on a bus and send them back to their home country. That's not my job. That job belongs to the government, which means Donald Trump has a responsibility to protect the citizens of the United States of America and to punish the evildoers that are in our country. If he does that, he is living out the God-given purpose of what government is to do. In regards to some of the other things that you're talking about, international wars or whatever it may be, I would say President Trump, he's the commander in peace. He has ended 7 wars that have happened across the globe. And so to that, we give him kudos, because obviously life is valuable. We don't want anyone dying in needless and endless wars. So as a Christian, I actually see what he is doing as an administration totally in alignment with what God defines government is to do. Government's job is to protect good citizens and to punish evil ones. That's the role of government, according to God. That's how God defines government. Since he's the creator of it, he gets to define what it is supposed to do. So as a Christian, I have no problem with it, because I recognize
But don't,
that's the role of government.
as an individual, like, I can't help, this
I am so
is
sorry
completely
you broke
wild.
up. I am so sorry. I didn't hear
Yeah,
anything you said. It was like broken up. I am so sorry.
that's okay. You froze for a second anyways. What, as a Christian, like as a person that follows Christ, and this is the whole basis of what you're talking about, like as your individual self, your idea is to get people to come together in the name of Jesus, in the name of Christ, right?
Sure.
I
Yes.
can't help but look at the violence. And if we look at an illegal person, that what we're looking at is illegal, it's the equivalent of fishing without a license. So we have to look at the law that's been broken for as an illegal immigrant, and call it what it is. It's the equivalent of fishing without a fishing license. Okay. And look at the tactics that are being taken against so many humans. I don't care who you are, but as humans, and go, I can't align myself with anything that they're doing based on their behavior, no matter how you want to break it down, how you want to cut it up, how you want to parse it out and make it make sense. If Jesus were standing next to me and someone's being tear gassed or thrown to the ground, there's no part of me that would look at Jesus and go, and he would say, oh, well, it's the government. It's out of my hands. And I don't understand how you, in your gut, can look at that and just turn a blind eye and say it's the government.
Well, I honestly, I don't understand the fishing analogy, but in regards to illegals that are here,
It's not an analogy. So when you come into the country illegally, the level of illegality is that of fishing without a license. So legal to legal, coming in illegally is the equivalent breaking of the law
I think
as
the
fishing without a
consequences
license.
are different. The consequences is for an illegal immigrant, you get sent back home. That's the consequence. It's different consequence than fishing without a license.
But I'm just saying legally, that's the breakdown of that
Well,
infraction.
the consequences are different. You go fishing without a license, there's a consequence for that. You go crossing into another country without the permission of that country and you do it illegally, the consequence is you're deported. Those are just the consequences. Just like, if you go and steal a piece of gum, there's a consequence. It's stealing. Or if you go and rob a bank and you steal from the bank, there's just a higher consequence. It's the
Right.
same thing, but the consequences are vastly different. So the person stealing the gum is going to have a lesser degree of punishment. They may be punished, but they're going to have a lesser degree than the guy who goes and robs the bank, because they're, although both stealing or robbing, they're two very different values of what they're doing. And so when you say people are being tear gassed or whatever the case may be, well, my understanding, and like I said, I'm not a member of ICE, so I don't have, full insight to what they're doing or anything like that. I only
It's
see
pretty bad.
like what you
It happened
see.
on my daughter's block here in Chicago, where the whole neighborhood was just tear gassed because there was some workers working on a house and the ice jumped the fence, tear gassed the whole street. There was families walking around. I'm just saying, if Jesus is standing right next to you, you cannot tell me that he's like, government.
Well, actually, Jesus was very clear. You honor the laws of the country that you're in. When he was asked about taxes, Jesus was very clear. Give to Caesar what is Caesar. And so if Caesar has said, this is the law of this country, meaning you have to come here legally, and you come here illegally, Jesus has already given the precedent on what to do. You're here illegally. You have broken the law of Caesar. You live in a country governed by Caesar. So we are Christians. We're in this world. We're not of this world. I'm a citizen of the kingdom of God. However, I do have to abide by the laws, the principles, and the rules of wherever it is that I live. So being in America, there's different laws, rules, cultures than, say, what it would be living over in China. Those are two very different things. And so if I choose to go live in China, I have to abide by how the Chinese government has determined this is how life is here. Doesn't mean that it's good, bad, indifferent, better, or worse. Just simply means I've got to abide by those laws. And if I don't, well, then I've subjected myself to punishment by the Chinese government. So when you come here, America's made it very clear. There is a legal process to come to this country. And then obviously there are those who have done it the wrong way, the illegal way. They have not honored the law of Caesar. They've not honored the law of the United States of America. Therefore, they are subject to the punishment of Caesar. That is not Jesus would step in and intervene. That God has created government to govern people because we need to be governed. Every government is different. I happen to like ours much better than what I see around the world. I'd much rather live in the United States of America than under communist China. That's just Jackson Lahmeyer's opinion. And so there's nothing wrong with government upholding its laws. If you break the law of this government in this country, you are subject to the punishment of whatever this government has determined that is, and that is to be deported. And if
Mhm.
you're running from deportation, obviously some means may be more extreme than others. And I cannot speak to the process. I've never gone out to try to catch illegals. I don't know how hard it is. I don't know how fast they run. I don't know how good they hide. And so these are the tactics that this administration has decided to use to round up many and many very violent criminals who do not belong here. And even if they're not violent criminals, they are a criminal nonetheless because they broke the law of this country. That is just a basic fact. Now, we can talk about what do you do with the nonviolent people who have come here illegally? How could you process them quicker, better, more efficient to become citizens? That's a whole nother discussion. However, the reality is if you're here illegally, you're here illegally, and you've subjected yourself to the punishment or the consequences of whatever that infraction is.
Yeah. Do you believe that pastors should endorse specific, like, political figures? And is there a line where, you know, the Christian coalitions and things of this nature are getting too political, where they're just like they shouldn't be in the Oval Office? It should be a clear separation of church and state.
Oh, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. First of all, people say, the Bible's not political. Well, those are people who've never read the Bible. You cannot take out the political stuff out of the Bible and still have the Bible. If you remove the political stuff out of the Bible, you would be left with hardly anything at all. Joseph was a politician. David was a politician. Daniel was an advisor to politician. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, advisor to politician. All the prophets in the Old Testament spoke to kings and against kings. John the Baptist was beheaded not because of a theological reason. John the Baptist got political and was beheaded for it. Jesus got political. Paul the apostle got political. So you cannot take preachers saying preachers shouldn't be political. Well, these are people that've never read the Bible, and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying you don't get to tell me that because I'm a pastor, I shouldn't get political, and you try to use the Bible to justify your claim. You've never read the Bible. The Bible is political because God created government. It is God's institution. It is not man's institution. It's God's institution that is ran by people. And so separation of church and state, that phrase is not in any of our founding documents. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the Constitution. It's in a letter from Thomas Jefferson to a group of pastors in Danbury, Connecticut in 1801. These pastors, Baptist preachers in Danbury, Connecticut, wrote President Thomas Jefferson a letter, and they said, "We're concerned about the growth of the federal government. We're concerned that America is going to revert into what we fled from in Europe, which was state-run religion. In Europe, if you were born in Italy, you were a Catholic. If you were born in Germany, you were a Lutheran. If you were born in England, you were an Anglican. It was state-run religion." And these Danbury Baptist preachers were concerned that we were going to become that. Thomas Jefferson wrote them back in a letter, and he said, "You all have nothing to be concerned with. We have built up a wall of separation between the state and the church, meaning there will not be state-run religion, meaning this: if you live in Connecticut, you're not required to be a Baptist. If you live in Oklahoma, you're not required to be a Catholic. You can practice your faith however you want. The state will not determine how the church operates. That does not mean that the church will have no involvement in the state. That is ludicrous. Every single one of our founding fathers, for the most part, 95% of the 250 founding fathers were devout Christians. Pastors were constantly involved in the forming of this country. And so, no, there's no separation of church and state in the sense of pastors and Christians have no involvement. That's nonsensical. Every other group gets to be involved. Why not Christians? Why not churches? Why not pastors? And so that's kind of my answer to the separation of church. It's a great question. A lot of people wonder it, and that's my take on it.
What do you say for people that don't want any religion in their life, or they want another religion or just spirituality in their life, and they don't want their government telling them what to do with their bodies or how to live their life? They really want that whole Christian exposure or ideology separate and away from the way that they live their everyday life, be it with abortion or vaccines or whatever the thing is. They don't want your influence on the way that they are governed.
Well, I could say I don't want their influence on the way this country is governed. That doesn't mean that they don't get to have influence. Here's the problem: we have more influence than they do. We have more than they do. This country was formed as a Christian nation. Still, the bulk majority of people in this country are Christians. And so, obviously, we're going to have a much more influential impact than those. Atheism is a relatively new thing. 99.9% of all people who have ever lived on this planet in the past and in the present, 99.9% have all believed in a god or gods. Atheism is relatively new, and it is a minor fraction of the population of humanity. And so they can live their life. They don't have to be a Christian. That is not listen, Christianity is very different than Islam. We do not convert through coercion or the sword. That's not authentic Christianity. You have to make that decision by yourself as an individual. I want to be a follower of Jesus. I cannot force anybody to follow Jesus. You have to make that decision all by yourself. And so we're not saying you have to be a Christian. However, when it comes to the values of every country has a value system. Every country has a culture. And we, as Christians, we want to see Christian values. We want, just like Muslims want to see Islamic values, just like communists want to see communist values, just like Buddhists want to see Buddhist values. Everyone has an agenda. And that's why we have elections. That's why we have free and open discussion and debate. And there are winners and there are losers. That's the basic line when it comes to elections. And so we live like we call a democratic republic. And so to say, well, we just don't want your influence as Christians in our lives, well, then that's impossible here. If you don't want a Christian influence, there are countries that do not have that, China being one of them. There are other places you could go where there is Muslim countries. There's no Christian influence at all. So you don't have to be a Christian. But to say that, well, we don't want a country where there's Christian influence, that's never going to happen here unless you rid this country of Christians.
But I, excuse me, I think that is where you're getting the white Christian nationalism labels,
Sure.
is people that are like, it's, patriarchy, it's, white supremacy, it's
Well,
this
white supremacy has nothing to do biblically. That's just something they use if you happen to be white. That's
right,
just
like that purity
I'm a white
culture
I'm a
kind
white
of.
male, so I'm automatically a racist and a bigot. That's just kind of how the left, without even hearing one word that I say, it's assumed he hates everybody who doesn't look like him or think like him. And the people who call for tolerance the most typically are the most intolerable people on the face of this planet. And so I've learned that just because I'm a white male, I'm already labeled as those things without me even opening my mouth.
Well, I always try to go at it with like, is this a racist thought? Because I was raised in a white area, white parents, I have white skin. So I always try to check myself like, okay, where's this kind of idea coming from? Does it have like white values to it? Should I like spread my thinking out? Should I check myself? So I
I
do
mean,
tend to check.
I would push back on that. What's wrong with white values? If blacks can have values, and if Hispanics can have values, and Asians can have values, what's wrong with white values? White values, or you could call them European values, Western civilization values, have benefited the world. I don't think there's anything wrong with white values. It doesn't mean that you superimpose white values on Hispanics or on blacks or Asians or Middle Eastern, whatever. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I have white values. There's nothing wrong
What
with
would
that.
be like one white value?
Well, it's Western civilization for the most part, and most people, the world has benefited from Western civilization. A white value, in and of itself, I would say, is very tied to Christian values. The Christian
Right. Well, that's where
values
that whole
are
white thing
very,
goes,
yeah, sure,
the white
sure.
Christian
But
nationalism. That's
I
where you
would
get it.
say, I would say, there's nothing wrong with white values. Europeans helped build the modern world for the
I
most
don't even
part.
know if there's such a thing as a white value.
Are there black values? Cultural values? Of course there are.
I mean, there
Are
might
there
be like
Asian culture?
cultural, like
Of course there are. Asians, listen,
food and
you
things
look
like
at
that. I don't know
Asian
if value.
you look at Asian people and their culture, and they have particular values, honor being one of them. That's a particular cultural value within the Asian community, and there's nothing wrong with it. That is something they hold to. There's nothing wrong. That is how they are raised. That is how they are trained. That's what they look back. If you look to Hispanic values, family is everything. Family is everything within the Hispanic community. That is a Hispanic cultural value. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. So every culture is built upon values, characteristics. Some may be better than others. Some you may want to embrace more than you want to embrace other things. There are Islamic values when we talk about in the Middle East. I particularly don't like them. I don't want to live in an Islamic worldview. I happen to strongly disagree with that. And I think our culture is better than that culture. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I don't want to live in that culture. I like the culture that I currently live in. Every culture has values, and there's nothing wrong with saying we have white values, whatever you define that as for yourself. If that is we're superior than everybody else, well, obviously that's dumb. That's not true. There are some great whites, and there's some really bad whites. I've met some of them. I live in Oklahoma. There's some really bad whites here. Every culture has good ones. Every culture has bad ones.
Do you look at some of the things and just, as far as the idea of the pushing a Christian nation, um, as being kind of problematic in the sense that, you know, like, again, I consider myself a follower of Christ, but at the same time, I think that we've blended this idea of Christianity, and in the name of Christianity, I think that we're creating a lot of evils in the name of Christianity. And I think that it's not it's not what I mean, I don't know if it was intended to at the time, but it just seems out of focus of what, like I said, Jesus would be wanting for our country and for what we're doing here. I think that everything's kind of out of whack in the name of Christianity, and we're using that term to get a lot of things passed and get a lot of things on board, a
I,
lot of
I I would
people
have
on
to
board.
hear specifically what you're referring to of what like this particular evil is being done in the name of Christ. I'm not aware of what you're specifically referring to. So I couldn't answer just in a generic, obviously you don't want to do any evil in the name of Christ because that makes Christ look bad. We're his
Yeah.
representative. You wouldn't want to do any, but I'm not sure exactly what policy or legislation or philosophies being advanced in the name of Christ that is evil in our country. I'm not aware of that.
So, like, when I look at, like, what they stopped with USAID, so any sort of, like, funding for cancer research for children, helping starving people in other countries, education in other countries, a lot of what Trump is doing right now has that kind of Christian label across it, which gets the evangelicals to support him, just across the board. Whatever he does, he was brought in by Christ and God. He was anointed as, the person that's supposed to lead our country for, and the evangelicals, I believe, are the ones that really pushed getting him
Of
elected.
course,
And so,
evangelicals did get him elected. You're correct. Yes.
yeah. And so when you look at that, there is a ego attachment to his presidency. So we've got the evangelicals, we've got Trump, we got him elected. And so now there's an alignment between evangelical Christians and whatever Trump does, right? And so even if what he does falls outside of what you and I might believe as followers of Christ, as followers of Jesus, um, it might be a little bit like, oh, I'm not so sure about that.
Well,
I
I mean,
think,
first of all, Donald Trump is not a perfect person, so he's not going to make he is not Jesus Christ. When I was on the campaign trail out campaigning, I'd have some people say, "How could you, as a Christian and as a pastor, support Donald?" I got it all the time,
yeah.
and my answer was, "You got to realize something, guys. Jesus Christ is not coming down from heaven to be on the ballot for president of the United States. That would be a great demotion. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He has no interest in being president of the United States. Jesus is not on the ballot. However, Jezebel is on the ballot, so we have to make a wise decision. You have two opposing people, two very different sets of values. Donald Trump most aligns with my values as an evangelical Christian, whereas Kamala Harris was the furthest thing from my values as an
How do you
evangelical
say
Christian.
that? How? I mean,
Oh,
Trump
that's a
is
no-brainer. That's a
he
no-brainer.
he was cheating on his wife with a porn star and paid her off. Like, there's no possible way that you can. He's best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Like, there's no possible way that you can say that Trump is ethically, morally,
The
spiritually
two things
closer.
that you just mentioned, were obviously many, many years ago and are greatly debated, whether the first thing with Stormy Daniels ever happened. If you've seen her lately, the Trump derangement syndrome has really taken its toll on her, because, she was ordered to pay him, when she thought she was gonna get paid by him. So that's I wouldn't go there. And then with the Epstein thing, that's obviously there's nothing hard and factual that Donald Trump was engaged in anything illegal with Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, we know that Jeffrey Epstein was banned from Mar-a-Lago, and for the reason being because Jeffrey Epstein made advances on a very young woman who worked at Mar-a-Lago, and Donald Trump found out about it and did not like it, and he banned him for that. So in regards to saying he's his best friend, I don't think that's true at all. They have pictures together. I have pictures with so many people. It's incredible. That doesn't mean I'm their best friend. I've gone to many events with so many people, taken pictures with them. I know them. I'm acquainted with them. Doesn't make me their best friend. So when you talk about the moral aspect of Donald Trump, did Donald Trump have some major blunders? Absolutely. Absolutely. As a Christian, do we condone and advance adultery and all that? Of course not. Of course not. However, those things were many, many years ago. And we could bring up Kamala Harris's past as well in regards to her sexual past. It's not very good. It's not very clean. It's not something that I think women should aspire to in order to climb your way to the top. So those are two arguments that I don't think necessarily are relevant in regards to 2024. Who is going to be the best person to be the president of the United States? With Donald Trump from 2016 to 2020, we had never had a more pro-Christian president in our lifetime. This is the man who gave us the Abraham Accords. This is also the man who gave us the Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade, sending that issue back to the states, where states like mine, Oklahoma, are nearly abortion-free states, meaning the murder of the innocent is not taking place in the state of Oklahoma,
Do you
thanks to
believe that
President
that's
Donald
okay
Trump.
in all forms, no matter what? Incest, rape, the health of the mother?
Well, first of all, the health of the mother is not an abortion. That's a medical procedure. They have to go in and do something. That is not a mother choosing to abort a child because she doesn't want the child. So that is a very separate issue. In regards to rape, incest, or just an unwanted pregnancy, you do not have that right. To go in, you say it's my body. Actually, that child is not your body. That child is in your body, but that child is not your body, and you do not have the right to murder your child. That's Jackson Lahmeyer's stance. I believe that God's very clear. He said, "Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I already knew you." So before you were ever conceived in your mother's womb, God already knew you. And for a mother to abort that which has been created inside of her, for me, that is morally apprehensible. That's morally wrong. Listen, I was 17 years
I
old when
think
I
the
found out I
problem
was
though
going
is that
to.
when you sorry to
Let me tell
interrupt.
my story. I
Sorry,
was
go ahead.
17 years old when I found out I was going to be a dad. I was in high school. I was a junior. Everybody said, "You got to abort the baby. You're too young. You're going to ruin that baby's life. You are going to ruin your life. You're going to ruin the mother's life. Everybody, you got to have an abortion. You got to have an abortion. You got to have an abortion." Thank God we did not. I have a 16-year-old daughter today. Today, she's turning 16 today. And
Happy
I am so
birthday.
glad I did not try to force an abortion upon the woman that I got pregnant. I'm so glad I didn't do it, because that child is grown today. And so, listen, as a Christian, I'm not going to budge on the abortion issue. I know people personally that were born out of a rape situation. And you know what? They are alive and they are functioning members of society, and they are doing tremendous things. Aborting a child out of rape does not undo the rape. You're adding an evil to an evil. The rape was evil. That doesn't mean that you add evil to evil. Doesn't mean you have to raise the child. Doesn't mean you have to keep. There are many people who would love to adopt and take that child in. So, in regards to the abortion thing, I'm not going to budge. As a Christian, I can't budge, because life is valuable. It is intentionally created by God. And I am not the author of life. And I'm also not supposed to be the ender of life, especially innocent life.
Do you think that though these types of issues are why people are afraid of this Christian national and Christian uh, seeping into our country and our leadership, that your
I
values,
wouldn't say seeping in. We've already been here. This nation
but
was
you know what I
founded as
mean,
a
like
Christian nation. Uh,
overwhelmingly.
no, we haven't seeped in. We've gotten more vocal because the left and atheistic ideas seeped into our country, especially in the 60s and the 70s. So abortion's a new thing here. We're talking 1972. This has not been something that every American has had the right to practice since the founding of the country. That's nonsensical. This is a relatively new thing that has happened in our country, and it's a terrible thing that has happened in this country. And so Christianity is not seeped back into America. We've always been here. This was founded as a Christian nation. It's undeniable. And so we are just reclaiming or retaking the ground, per se, politically, that we've lost over the last, 30 to 40 years.
But do you understand why that's scary to some people?
Who would it be scary to?
People that don't align themselves with those beliefs,
What beliefs?
Christian beliefs.
Would be like Christian beliefs that thou shalt not murder. I don't think that's scary to anybody unless you're a murderer. Thou shalt not steal. It shouldn't be scary to anybody unless you're a
Like
thief.
abortion, things of that nature. Like if they want.
Thou shalt not commit murder. So if you're wanting to commit murder, then yeah, that value would be very scary to you. Of course it would
Yeah.
be.
I don't know. I just think that it's, of all the people, Trump is just so out of alignment from what I would think that you would choose as someone that you would want to lead your government, unless, of course, he's just, ripe for the picking and is going to do what he wants and promised
Well,
you.
I'd also say I wouldn't want a pastor to leave our government. I don't want a pastor to lead our government. I want a strong ruler who wields the sword. Is what the Bible says. The king is to wield the sword and to punish evildoers. I want a very strong leader that whenever you commit evil, you do not get a slap on the wrist. You are justly punished. And Donald Trump has been very strong on crime. The Bible says that is the role of the king. That is the role of the leader in a country, is to wield the sword and to produce fear in the hearts and the minds of his citizens. Meaning, I don't want to break the law because if I do, I know the leader, the king, is going to wield the sword against me. There has to be a healthy fear. We have to fear God. We have to fear our government in a healthy sense, not afraid that they're going to come after us for no reason. But if you intentionally commit a crime, you should be very afraid. And that's a direct quote from the New Testament, not the Old Testament, the New Testament. You should be very afraid if you are an evildoer of the king.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that we should be afraid of God.
You have to be. You have to. The fear of the Lord's the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. You
I
should be
just
very
think that
afraid of God.
I look at God as more like a helper and like just like
No, no, no. God's the
incredible amounts
creator.
of love
He is a
and
God of
caring.
love. God
And
loves us
that's
so much, he should have wiped us out a long time ago.
you're
In
not
God's
shitting
infinite
me.
in
You're
God's
not
infinite love, in
you're
God's
not
infinite
kidding
love,
me.
he is not. He has not. God is a God of love, but he is the
Yeah.
creator. He is the sustainer. He is the one who determines what good is. We don't determine good, he does. He is the one that determines what love is, since he's the creator. We are creation. We don't get to make those decisions. We are the creation of God. And that's why the Bible says you are to have a fear of God because he's God. We're not. He's
Yeah.
God. We're not. And if you do not have a healthy fear of God, the Bible says, fear God and you will sin not. You don't fear God, you'll live a life of sin. If you fear God, the Bible says you will not live a life of sin because you have a healthy fear of God. That
I
doesn't
don't know.
mean that you're
I don't
afraid
fear
to
God
run
at
from
all,
him.
and I'm not sinning. Like I just ever since
Well, to say you're not
I
sinning, that's an oxymoron. You're a human being.
well, I mean,
That's
like, in the sense
impossible.
of, like, when I remove that part of, like, any sort of fear and more of, like,
I'm not
co-creation.
referring to a fear of I'm scared of God. I am referring to a fear that is a reverence of God. He's God. I'm not. I am not on his level. In my family, there's Kendra and I, we're the parents. We have our children. They're not on our level. Bottom line, they are human beings. They're not on our level. Mom and dad, kids. There's two, it's authority.
Yeah,
When it comes to authority, there is a distinguishing factor. There is one in authority, there's one under authority. And the one in authority has authority over those under authority. God is in authority. As human beings, We are under his authority. So we have a reverence, we have a fear, a healthy fear of who he is. He's God, and therefore I should live appropriately before him. That's what we're referring to. I'm not talking about being afraid like God's going to send a lightning bolt and strike you. I'm not talking about Greek mythology. We're talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the New Testament and the Old Testament.
I gotcha. I don't know. I just think that Trump's not it when it comes down to it. I think
The
that
good news is you're able to hold that opinion in America,
yeah.
right? You get to hold that opinion, and that's just fine.
And I just have a hard time. Like I understand that, pastors and evangelicals. I did a stint in fundamental Baptist for a while, and I just have a hard time with the evangelicals supporting him. And at the heart of hearts, when I look at, being a follower of Christ and reading the red words, I think that there's something that's I understand wanting to get your agenda and Christianity into the hearts and minds and that of Americans, but I have a hard time truly believing that you think that he's the best person for the job and the violence that's happening and the destruction and what's happening with farmers and people being hurt. I have a hard time heart to heart, person to person, thinking that this is the best route regardless of how many words you put behind it. It's just I think that when you really sit back and get away from the political side of it, there's nothing in me that thinks that you believe that this is the right thing. There just isn't, because I know that if Jesus were sitting here down with us right this second, he'd be like, "Bro, this ain't it. This, gassing people ain't it."
Well, I don't think you get to speak on behalf of Jesus, first of all. Second of all, you also don't get to speak on behalf of me either.
Yeah.
Uh, I support President Donald Trump because I do believe that he is the best person to lead our country right now. He was our nominee for the Republican Party. His opponent was Kamala Harris, who not only was unqualified, but also doesn't have the value system that I have as a Christian. They're just irreconcilable. The bottom line, they're irreconcilable. And so when you give me two options, you have two, or you could vote third party and it really doesn't matter because it's not going to do anything. You have two options. And for me, it's an easy one. It's a no-brainer. Does that mean that Donald Trump is a perfect saint? Not at all. Not at all. But neither am I. And I'm a pastor. All right. I'm held to a higher standard. And I don't even reach that standard. And so for me to try to superimpose the standard that I am supposed to live to upon him when I don't even reach that standard, well, that's hypocritical. And so I'm never going to do that. I recognize he's a flawed individual, but I think he's doing a tremendous job. He was handed a terrible economy. He was handed a world that was at war, a world that was falling apart. He was handed a border that was wide open for illegal immigrants and illegal drugs to come through. And so in, 10 to 11 months, I think he's done a great job sealing off the border. I think he's done a great job targeting drug traffickers. I think he's done a great job bringing peace to 7 wars that were happening across the globe that he inherited. He didn't start, he inherited. And then obviously, right now his objective is to make America affordable. And that's going to take time. America is a very large ship. It is not a speedboat that you could just turn around overnight. It's going to take a little bit of time. I believe that the tariffs will have a long-term impact that will be best for Americans in the long run. I think obviously right now we're experiencing the short-term impact of that. And so I have hope and I have trust that he'll make the right decisions to lead our country to really make America great again. That's why we put him there. And so obviously time will tell, right? We're brand new. We're 10 months into this. It's you got three and a half more years to go, and so time will tell. But I have confidence that he'll do what he needs to do to leave a great legacy and to be a president known for making America great again. So that's my optimism. And that's my hope, that I hope it goes very, very well. Obviously, anything can happen, but I'm the
Do you
opinion
have a
he's going to
line
do a
in the
good
sand
job.
for the Epstein files? I am always curious about that.
What do you mean, a line in the sand?
Like if they release the files today, that woman's being sworn into office. Do you have a line in the sand? Like if he's in there, if he was at Epstein Island,
Well, you have to refer. What do you mean he's in there? Because we know he's in there.
well, we know he's in there, but to any certain extent, do you have
I
any line in
well,
the sand where you're
because he's
like,
in the
bro,
Epstein files. No, that doesn't have anything to do with it at all. Like, what do you mean? Donald
like
Trump was
if
having sex with
he's
minors?
yeah,
Yeah, of course. It'd be a red line in the sand. Of course.
so that's there for you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Do I believe that happened? Absolutely not. But obviously, yeah, that's a red line in the sand. And if that had happened, believe me, Joe Biden and the Democrats, especially Kamala Harris, would have already used it. They would
Well, I'm
never
to the
have
point
allowed
now,
Donald
to
Trump
be
back in
honest
the
with you,
ballot.
Jackson, I'm to the point now where I think that the whole thing is they're all a nightmare. This is not
Yeah, I mean,
left versus right anymore
you and a lot
where
of
I'm
people
at.
think that.
I'm over all of them. So
Sure,
it's not
you and a lot of
Biden
people.
or Kamala. Like I'm just over the whole thing. Um, but yeah, I'm always curious, like if this comes out, like, do you have your line in the sand where you're like, yeah, I'm done with this
Sure,
guy?
but I have no concerns about it because if that were the case, first of all, they would have never let him become president in the first place. Second of all, they would have never have let him get reelected if those things were true. If those things were there, they would have already used them. They've used everything against the man. They've
Yeah, I don't
thrown
know.
everything at the wall. Nothing has stuck. Nothing has stuck. That would have stuck. That would have stuck early on. It's not there. They would have already used it. And so that's why I have no concerns. Is he in the Epstein files? Sure. Yeah, I know he's in the Epstein files.
So if he's in there and they've got proof, are you coming back on here to talk about it?
If they've got proof that Donald Trump was raping minors, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All
But
right.
I'll promise you, we won't be having that conversation.
All right. You promise you're coming back if he's in there and if it says bad stuff. Well, I appreciate you being on and sharing your book, Chasing After the Wind, sorry. But thank you for sharing and thank you for putting up with all my questions. I appreciate you
I love
today.
it. I love the back and forth, the banter. It's so much better than just we agree on everything and therefore we have a boring conversation. I thought that was great. I thought it was really fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a great day. And everybody else, I'll see you here next week. Thank you so much. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredythwillits.com or on Instagram at Meredyth with a Y for behind-the-scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredyth with a Y.